make that change in your life as well.
All right. So what I get from this is that we're giving dimensions to the generations of the internet, and it's not just about the bandwidth or the speed anymore. We're
Correct. Correct. Exactly. So just enabling a dumb pipe, as we would say, would not, you know, make the complete picture. You then also need to it needs to create a change and enable certain aspects, what we call use cases. So you could generate many other use cases that you can think of in the healthcare that you mentioned as part of the depth program, for example. So it enables use cases on the healthcare. So you can have a doctor sitting somewhere else in Islamabad, in Shifa, in a good hospital, for example, and the patient being in a rural area but not having access to a good doctor. So in order to have that good analysis and a doctor going through a patient's records, or maybe even touching it, so he could perhaps have a feel by touching, virtually, and all the results. So he could even conduct a surgery. So obviously, the reaction that me with a needle or with a knife, performing with a surgical instrument, performing an operation, it shouldn't be that there's a jitter, there is a gap that I cut and it's still not cutting on the other side, or I don't get back the information on this side. So it's about enabling those use cases, and the platform in terms of the generations ensure that it gives you the right speeds and the right latencies.
sure. Sir, you mentioned about the use cases, and that was actually what my next question was going to be. But before that, we'd like to take a short break, and we'll be back and then continue with the podcast. Is that okay?
Sure, sure.
My next question will be I'll be taking it from the last answer that you gave about use cases. So, if we talk about the potential of these technologies, and if we are not just only focusing on healthcare for now, if we talk about entertainment, even military or uh, arts, what do you think would be other use cases, the common use cases for the common man, according to these technologies?
Right. So it's a $1 million question per se. So if if um, if someone knew what was the killer application per se, there would be no two thoughts of how to develop further the technology. So one thing is developing or having the idea. The other is adopting to it as well. So that adoption takes time, and that adoption also can kill the entire project and idea. But 5G, for example, what it has been mostly deployed for now is its fixed wireless access. So it's about giving a high bandwidth pipe. So 5G, in fact, by the architecture, by the technology, offers three dimensions. One is what we call the enhanced mobile broadband, which is the pipe size. So you can download at very high speeds. The other is the connectivity of many devices. So it's what we call the massive IoT. So you can connect millions of devices. That device could be a handset, could be any sensor, could be your fridge, could be anything that would sense and give you an input. And the third dimension to it is very low latencies, what we call ultra low reliable latency. So these three aspects, by definition of the 5G standard, are the drivers of 5G. So where I have a need of very low latencies, for example, is where I will go on that track of 5G, where the architecture needs to support ultra low latencies. So architecture-wise, this is a bit more technical. So 5G can be deployed in a non-standalone mode and a standalone mode. Non-standalone means that it anchors with a 4G network, which is the worldwide deployment that takes place right now. The next step is a 5G standalone deployment. So there is no dependency on 4G. And by virtue of that, the architecture changes and mobile edge computing comes in. So all that does is that instead of having a centralized network, you decentralize it as much as it possible. So instead of data being carried across a state, for example, or wherever that switching node is, you just put the hardware closer to the heart, to the user. So this is what we call edge computing. So it's at the edge of the network and closer to the user. And when you do that, the latencies reduce. So one developed use case, for example, so to come to your question, is autonomous cars. So you don't need to drive. So anyone who has this such kind of accessibility issue can hop onto such cars, and it would drive by itself. The technology can support, yes. You can go into very low latencies that can enable it. So the way it's been worked upon now is that the car not only senses what is ahead, but even further ahead, and the roads and the bends, and has a 3D image. And so it's safe, as they say. So Google had started this program a lot of many years ago. But of course, accidents are reported, and so as long as I can drive, I would put this question: would you want an autonomous car? Would you want such a car that can drive by itself? Whereas, it may cost me 4 times more, whereas I can drive it by myself. So, use case is one thing, adopting to that. So, the point that I'm trying to get across is that there could be use cases, but which one comes at what price point today, as because it's still in its adoption stages, will actually drive the success of the use case. Um, Other than that, as much as you can get stores virtually, so all of it revolves around having a head, one of those virtual gears that you put on and enter in a virtual world per se. So
VR sense.
um, exactly, the VR headset. So you could enter Macy's store, for example, and it would have, you would have a 3D view of what is on the first floor of Macy's. And you could look at an actual view of what's lying at Polo's stall, for example, and what kind of colors are in, and what kind of collection is there. So it enables e-commerce by virtue of that. You can pick and choose. You can perhaps even have a view of yourself wearing that cloth, and understanding, would it suit you? Does it fit you? Does a medium suit you, fit you, or would the large fit you? So all these are use cases of immersed, if I can say, environment where you are in a 3D virtual environment, and actually somewhat interacting with what is a physical object, with what is physical. So it's a combination of digital and physical that you're